The town came down hard on me saying, hey, you need to stop doing this. Otherwise, we're going to fine you $1,000 a day.
We wanted to talk about lease options. So some people know of them, some people don't know of them.
I'm giving the tenant the option to buy it. And then when they move in, instead of a security deposit, they'll give me a down payment. I want to move them from becoming a renter to a homeowner. And a lease option gives them that pathway.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Agent to Investor podcast, where we talk about the agent side of real estate investing. We'll be talking about the successes, the lessons, and all in between. My name is Nico Garcia, local real estate agent and investor based out of Montgomery County, Maryland. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Anna Bilek, Northern Virginia realtor and mostly out-of-state investor.
And today we have another special guest. We have one of my buddies, one of my action team members from RPM. We have Alex Cortez on the show. Welcome to the show, brother.
What's up? Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're very excited to talk about you and talk about your real estate journey. But before we do that, I wanted to give you some space to introduce yourself, a little bit of, your background, where you're from, and then what initially got you introduced into real estate.
Yeah, so my name's Alex Cortez. I'm a full-time professional pilot that got into real estate investing through really becoming a pilot because I saw a need for housing. So I ended up renting out rooms and house hacking. And that's kind of how my whole real estate journey evolved from there. But I'm from Monroe, New York, and I invest in Connecticut as well as parts of New York as well, but mostly in Connecticut. So yeah, happy to share my story and be here.
Awesome. So I didn't know you started as house hacking and renting out. I think that's an awesome way to get into learning about real estate, right? The benefits of landlording in your own property. But talk to me about those initial stages. What did you read a book? What did you know about it before you even dove in?
Yeah, and what was the problem you identified? Because that's the thing that most people don't realize. You clearly saw a problem and you were like, I need to find a solution. So I want to hear how that all kind of came together.
Yeah, so I started realizing, well, there was a demand for month-to-month rentals that were affordable with other pilots in my company. And we were trying to find housing that gave us what we were looking for, but there wasn't any of that. So I basically decided to provide it. And I said, why don't I buy a house and then I can rent out the rooms to other pilots because it's more affordable for them. I can do it in a flexible way where they can rent month to month. And, it just kind of makes it a win-win. So that's what I started to look into. And then I started reading more real estate books, trying to educate myself on it. And so by the time I made that decision until I bought my first property, it was probably a good 10 months or so of just educating myself, searching for the right property, and then finally being able to buy my first property. So yeah, that's how the journey started. And then it didn't go as planned, but we could get more into that if you'd like. But yeah, that's how it started.
I mean, 10 months seems like a long time, thinking about it, but it's really not that long. There's a lot of people that go years doing the reading and listening to podcasts and things like that. So I'm just curious, did you have a fear of taking that first leap of actually buying your first investment property, and what made you kind of take that leap?
Yeah, 100%. There is a lot of fears and hesitations with it. It's a whole new field. And I just did my best to get as much knowledge as possible. So I read and I listened to podcasts like this, and I listened to as much as I could from people who were more experienced than me to kind of give me the edge up because I didn't know anybody in the real estate industry. I didn't know anything about it at all. I just knew that I was always interested in financial freedom. I was always interested in having options. And I knew I was an avid learner, and I was driven and motivated for options and freedom. So, that interest is kind of what led me down the path of researching about financial freedom and all that. And then the opportunity came up through my job. So I think it's important for people to always look out for opportunities wherever they are as a W-2 employee, whatever you're doing, because there's sometimes ways to get into what you're looking for through an avenue that's maybe not as obvious. These were just conversations we were having after work. about, hey, I'm trying to find an apartment to rent, and everything is super expensive up here in the Northeast. And I don't want to sign a year lease because we need to be able to relocate from the Northeast down to the Caribbean, wherever the flight operations require us to be. So just listening to people's problems, listening to people's concerns, what they need, and then trying to come up with a solution to that need. That's really what entrepreneurs do. That's what real estate investors do, agents do. So I think, kind of just learning to tune in to listen to people's problems and then trying to find solutions for those things is where the opportunities are.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you say it didn't go so well, though? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, no, it didn't go as planned. So the intention was to rent out the rooms to the other pilots, and I did rent out one room to one of my buddies, and then I slowly started to fill in the vacancies. But shortly after that was, as you guys remember, the 2020 pandemic, and that hit the company hard. So about 80% of the pilots got furloughed. That was my tenant base, was my coworkers. So it became hard to fill the vacancies. And then I was kind of left in this predicament where I either had to open it up to the public and start marketing to strangers, or I had to stop renting out the rooms because it wasn't working. So that was a fear of mine because I didn't ever do this before. And I was like, now I'm going to have to heavily screen these tenants. I don't know who they are, or what their employment is like, or anything. So I decided to go down that route, and it ended up working better than I thought. But I did spend a lot of time screening them and being very careful with who I let in there because I was living there myself. So I was living in the basement. It was a 5-bedroom home. So I was trying to fill 4 other bedrooms, and any person I let in there, I was sharing the kitchen with, I was sharing a bathroom with, so any of their problems became my problems, right? So I had to be very careful about who I was bringing in there. I took my time. I brought in some really good young professionals, people who were similar to me, but they weren't necessarily pilots anymore. So, slowly filled the vacancies, but it became extremely management intensive, as you can imagine. There's little things you just don't think about, like, okay, whose cabinet is this? What about that shelf in the fridge? It just became, you got 5 guys living in the house sharing a kitchen, and the bathroom was becoming a mess. Who cleans that up? Who's responsible for cleaning it? So there's like these little things that you have to work out when you're doing house hacking and rent by the room. But if you can figure out a system for it, it does work, and it's extremely profitable, especially the more rooms you have. But you have to systematize it, just like I think anything else.
Yeah, co-living can be a fantastic strategy, having your systems and maybe like house rules and things like that. Like you mentioned, a cabinet for one room, a cabinet for another room, and having it all set up. But that's one of those things that you don't know going in, right? You kind of learn as you go, and you started in 2020, it's in 2019, and you looking back, you're like, oh, I would have done this and this differently, but you got your foot in the door, right? And you learned a lot, and I think that's pretty cool. I like what you talked about, is finding your niche, right? You were working with pilots that needed housing, and they were like, it's too expensive. It's too expensive to go out, and I don't want a full year lease. So you being that advocate for them, that's a win-win for everyone. So I think that's pretty cool. But I wanted to, it's not every day we get a pilot on our show, right? So I wanted to, first of all, did you always want to be a pilot? And what type of pilot are you doing, you said?
So I fly for a small charter company. It's private flights. It's a small light jet. It's like 4 passengers. I didn't know I wanted to be a pilot. Like, I didn't have anyone else in my family that was a pilot at all. It was something I was researching in high school when I was looking at, where do I want to go to college? What kind of careers do I want to do? And that was something that piqued my interest, because the one thing I knew is I didn't want to be stuck in an office all day long. My dad worked on Wall Street. He worked in New York City for 30 plus years. And I didn't see myself doing that type of work. I wanted to be outside. I wanted to be, traveling, doing some interesting things. And I, thought that would be an interesting field. So I took an intro flight to see if I really did like it. And that's that. After that intro flight, I was like, wow, this is a great avenue to pursue. So that's when I decided to go down that route. And then the other part of it was I started to see that I would excel in the aviation classes because I was never the best student. I was maybe a B student in high school. And then in the aviation classes, I was getting A's. So I was like, okay, this is something that I'm interested in. It's something that I'm good at. And I think that it's something I want to stick with. So I ended up sticking with it, and it ended up being a great decision for me. But it was a very different avenue to take because it was completely just, I didn't know about it. It was all new.
Yeah. And how long have you been flying as a pilot? How long has it been now?
So professionally, it's been about a little over 10 years, but I got my private pilot's license in 2013. So I started flying when I was 17 maybe. And then professionally I started after graduating college. I was an instructor, a flight instructor, and then I went to a small charter company flying a single engine turboprop PC-12. And then I started to fly for the owners of an aircraft and their family. And so I did that for over 5 years with them, which was very interesting for me. And it actually helped build my real estate career because I learned about the families and the owners of these aircraft. I was very curious. So I was always asking them, hey, what is it you do? First of all, how did you get the money that you got today? And obviously you're doing well for yourself. You can own an aircraft. So I wanted to learn about these people that created options for themselves and freedom for themselves and see if I could integrate it into my own life. So the more time I had with them, the more I could learn and integrate it into my own life. So that's what I was trying to do as I was working and basically learning as I was working. So I did that for over 5 years, and then I wanted to move on to some bigger jets and progress in my aviation career. So I moved into this company that I'm in with now, flying light jets.
And was that initial person that you mentioned, were they actually in real estate investing themselves? And that's what kind of when you were asking them questions?
So the families that I flew for, there was 3 different owners. 2 of them were involved in real estate. One of them was more involved in the ownership of land and developing the land and then selling off the lots of land to developers, right? And then the other one was more of a residential, commercial type of investor, owning big apartment complexes and owning and operating hotels. But they started small and they grew from there. So 2 out of the 3 were involved in real estate somehow. And I just kept seeing that pattern come up. It was like either business, stocks, or real estate. It was those 3 avenues. And real estate was the most interesting to me. But I knew if I was going to get there and get the same result as these people, I would need to choose one of those avenues.
Right.
So, yeah, I just think that real estate is a business, so it kind of could be the same thing, but you either own and operate your own business and produce significant cash flow through it, invest in stocks, or buy and operate real estate or some sort of investing through real estate. That's the 3 avenues that I've found with all the people that I've flown that have a lot of money. I think I just kept asking them, and those are the 3.
Yeah, well, kudos to you for asking those questions, right? Some people just kind of go through their day to day and, their job is to fly them from A to B. But you were actually, curious to how they built their wealth. How do they own these aircrafts? And you asked those questions. So that, first of all, that's awesome. And thanks for sharing about your background. So we wanted to have you on because we wanted to talk about these 2 topics. I'm not sure if we actually talked about it on our show. yet, but you talked about house hacking, but we wanted to talk about lease options. So some people know of them, some people don't know of them, but for somebody new, can you explain what a lease option is in like simple terms?
Yeah, so a lease option is a regular rental with the option to buy the property later down the road. So I'm giving the tenant the option to buy it. I want to move them from becoming a renter to a homeowner. And a lease option gives them that pathway.
Okay. And what could, I mean, there's definitely benefits to the buyer, right? Or the tenant becoming a buyer, right? The home ownership has built a ton of wealth, but for somebody that's like a seller, what's the benefit for them with the strategy?
So for somebody who's trying to sell the property, you mean?
Right. Right. Yep.
Um, well, this would be the way that I structure it is basically the lease option is for the tenant. So I'll buy the property through conventional financing, for instance. I'll fix it up, I'll get it ready, and then I'll find a tenant that wants to rent and put them on a year lease, just like a normal rental agreement. But then they have this other portion of the lease that is an option agreement. And that option agreement is going to give them the ability to buy the home after renting for at least a year at whatever the home is appraised at when they want to buy it. So there is a bottom price that I'll sell it to them for. So it won't go any lower than that. But like if they want to buy it in 4 or 5 years, we get the property appraised. That's what I sell it to them for, minus their down payment and any equity that they build over the months, because a portion of their rent every month will also go towards the purchase price. And then when they move in, instead of a security deposit, they'll give me a down payment, let's say $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 down. That's non-refundable. But that down payment is what gives them the option to purchase, because I'm basically holding the property for them.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go and sell it to someone else because they just gave me the down payment saying, we want to buy this home. We're going to try to buy this home. It's going to give them time to build credit. It's going to give them time to get everything in order. If they're self-employed, maybe they need 2 years of tax returns, whatever the case may be. They have to get things in order for them to be able to buy the home. And so that's what this program allows them to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, the type of people that you're targeting, it sounds like maybe they're not ready to buy at that exact moment, right? Whether it's the credit, whether they don't have enough money saved up, but you're still collecting essentially a down payment or a security deposit up front for your security to hold the property off the market and have them the option to buy it. So I know you mentioned 3,000, 5,000, 10,000. What is like a general, like what they're actually putting down for that down payment for?
So I've had most people usually go with the lower down payment option because it is non-refundable. They don't know. There's certain things that are not certain to them yet. So they want to reduce their risk. They usually put a lower down payment. But I give them a couple options. Like if they put more down, I lower their rent amount. So like if they put, let's say $10,000 down and, the market rent is 3,500, maybe I'll put it down to 34 or 33. And then if they put less down, I'll increase the rent amount per month. So it kind of gives them like, okay, do I want a lower monthly amount or do I want a higher monthly amount? And they like to have that control and optionality. So I think it's a nice way to give them a little bit of control over what's more important to them. I've had some tenants even say, I give them a range, let's say $3,000 to $10,000 down. And some of them say, hey, can I put more down? I want to actually lower my monthly rent even more. Would you be willing to do that? And then I'll think about it and see if it makes sense. But it really just depends on the tenant situation and what their priorities are.
Can you talk to me about like the difference of tenant qualification when you're doing this lease option versus like a actual just traditional long-term rental lease? Because it sounds like maybe their credit may not be up to certain standards or.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes the one thing that's preventing them from becoming a homeowner is their tenant is their credit. So they need time to improve the credit. And so what I found is that there is a threshold that makes sense. I kind of now try to stick with the minimum credit score that conventional lenders use, which is around 620 or 630. I think if you go below that, you start to run into some problems. I tried to give some tenants the opportunity that were in the 500s because of other things that were a little bit better, but I ran into trouble with them. So I think for me, it's like a hard cutoff now. I try to not go below 620. I look at the credit. You're going to screen them like you would any tenant for a traditional rental, but you're going to do a couple of extra steps because you're basically underwriting as a lender would with a potential homeowner because they're going to be a homeowner, right? So you want to look at, their debt to income ratio, and you want to look at the stability of their income. Where is it coming from? How long have they had it? And is it trending upward or is it going down, right? So looking at these things from a different perspective, like as if I was the lender giving them a loan to buy a property. So it's a little bit more involved than just a traditional screening with a different perspective because they're not going to be there for a couple of years and move out. The idea is they want to be there for a couple of years and buy your property.
Okay. How long do these, and maybe you said it earlier, if I missed it, I apologize. Like, how long are they typically living in the house before they buy it from you? Does it depend?
Yeah, I think it just depends on the tenant, but sometimes they don't buy. Sometimes they move out. I would say like maybe 20% of them actually go through with the whole process and buy the property. So I'm having the one that's moving out. I have a tenant now that's moving out at the end of March. Great tenants, one of my best tenants, but they don't want to buy the home because they found another home that they like better. So they tried to get, financing and all that last year. They were looking into it. They were like, yeah, I think we can make it work. But they went shopping just to see what their options were. And, the wife said, hey, we like this other home a little bit better. And they understand they're not going to get their deposit back. That gave them the option, right? But it's no problem. They're just going to move on. And now I'll have to go and find another tenant to put in.
Well, I guess since you lower the rent, since you adjust the rent up or down, I'm assuming that they feel at least like, oh, I'm not totally losing out because they got to pay a certain amount of rent based off of their deposit. It sounds like you've adjusted it up or down. So maybe it makes them feel like they didn't lose out as much because they did get something out of it.
Yeah. In this case, they had put in a pretty good deposit and their rent was lower than maybe they would have got otherwise.
Yeah.
So some people that, from what I've heard, that implement this lease option strategy say that the actual tenants take better care of the property because they see it being their future home, right? Their future purchase. Are you seeing something similar, or does it really depend?
Yeah, I would say if you bring in the right tenant to begin with, 100% that's the case. But if you're bringing in a tenant that just can't afford to pay the rent to begin with, they're obviously not going to spend money on keeping the property in good shape. They're going to struggle to make the rent payment. But otherwise, if you do your due diligence correctly, you bring in the right tenant, the one that's moving out now at the end of March, for instance, I go to check on the property every so often, and the landscaping is phenomenal. They've done a great job of keeping the exterior really clean looking. And they've already told me, hey, when we move out, we're going to clean the property. It's probably going to look better than when I gave it to them. So, in that situation, it's great because it makes my life easier. And now it's going to be hopefully an easy turnover because the property's in good shape. And yeah, they have a whole different mindset. When they're renting, they're thinking like, this may be our home one day. And I try to explain that to them. Like when they're moving in, I say, take care of this property like it's your own because one day it may very well be.
Mm-hmm.
And they recognize that. And so if they are someone who has, they're in a good position to pay the rent, they are going to be fixing things up and taking care of it. Because that's the other thing in the lease options. The difference is that the tenant is responsible for repairs. So I don't get calls about broken toilets or anything like that because the tenants realize like that's their responsibility. We're trying to move them into home ownership. And when you're a homeowner, those are things you have to take care of. So that is one of the differences too in a lease option versus a traditional rental. That burden doesn't fall on the landlord, which reduces a lot of your operating expenses and workload.
Yeah. They're more emotionally invested. They're more financially invested for the property to look good. But I wanted to kind of circle back when you are actually marketing this property for a lease option, right? And I know we didn't even touch about this, but I know you're also a licensed real estate agent. So I'm just curious to how you are finding these people, how you're marketing to get a lease option.
I'm doing it really the way most people will do it. The only difference is, as an agent, obviously you have access to the MLS, so I can post it on the MLS. I've gotten really good tenants on Facebook Marketplace. I use the Nextdoor app for neighbors. Posting things on there sometimes helps. And then Zillow, obviously, and all those main platforms. The MLS is really helpful sometimes, especially if you're doing lease options, because now you have agents that may be working with potential renters, but hey, you might be able to buy this property. So now some of these agents say, hey, listen, if I get these tenants, in your home and they rent it out and they want to buy it, do I get a commission if you sell the home to them? And that can be structured any way you want. So I could say, yeah, sure, I'll do it, but I'm not going to offer a traditional commission because it's not the same exact work you would necessarily have to do if you were just trying to find a home for your client to buy. They're just going to be renting it. And then down the road, they're going to say, hey, I want to buy it. And then you're going to help them with some of those navigating the purchase prop. But it's not the same as going to look at like 7 different homes and showing them homes and all that stuff, right? So you could do a lot of different things with it, and it offers a lot of options for creativity.
Okay. Cool. So Alex, I wanted to also touch base about a different strategy that you also implement, which is called rental arbitrage. And sounds fancy, but for those who have never heard of it, what is that strategy in, again, simple terms?
Yeah, rental arbitrage is basically when usually the way that it's meant is when you're getting permission from a landlord to rent the property out on a platform like Airbnb or Furnished. So you're paying the landlord, let's say, $1,800 a month in rent. The landlord says, hey, we're going to give you permission to put this out there and rent it on Airbnb. You then rent it out on Airbnb for $2,800 a month. And you keep the spread. You keep the difference between the $2,800 and the $1,800. That's what's meant by arbitrage. It's the difference between the two. So you're just doing that through a rental, and that's where the term rental arbitrage comes from. But it's essentially a sublease. So you don't own the property. You're just managing it. You're managing and operating the property and keeping the profits. So it's not an equity play. It's a pure cash flow play.
Like you mentioned Airbnb, is there certain like bedroom, bathroom counts that make sense for this strategy versus the other strategies that you were implementing?
I think you could do it with anything. The way I did it was with apartments, small apartments, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartments. They're easier to manage. When you rent out a home on Airbnb, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that can break, and there's a lot of costs associated with furnishing that home. Just to give you an example, to furnish a 1 bedroom, 1 bath apartment here in upstate New York, this was a couple of years ago, but to do it in a really nice way, everything, utensils, from beginning to end, wall art and all, was probably around $10,000. So you could get in with $10,000. That's a lot better than a down payment, right? And then now your cash on cash return is going to be very good. But if you're doing it on a home, it's going to cost you, let's say it's a 3-bedroom home. You can 3X that at least. I'd say 30K maybe, furnished a living room and all that. So plus you got other systems you got to worry about. So it just depends what you want to do, how much you want to put in, but you can do it on any type of property.
Okay. So one more question before we talk about Anna's question, because I think that's a good point. We'll talk about regulations and how that changed. But I know a question that a lot of people ask me when we talk about rental arbitrage is like, why would the seller even, or why would the owner even want to do something like that, right? Like sublease, and that's going to be more wear and tear on the property. Why would a seller even, or an owner, decide they want to do that?
Yeah, it's going to be for a specific type of owner. I got a lot of no's at the beginning. The one owner that said yes, he was a pure entrepreneur, and he owned a lot of commercial properties, mixed use commercial properties. So he was used to working with business owners on retail stores and things like that. So he was very open-minded and flexible, and he was willing to give me a shot because of that. So I think targeting the right type of owner is important. And then also explaining to them that it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more wear and tear. A lot of people think that. But if you're doing a short-term rental, they're there for 2 days. They're probably not going to use the kitchen very much. When they leave, you're going to get it cleaned. Right. So you're cleaning the property like 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. If you have a regular tenant, how many times does the inside get cleaned? Once a month if you're lucky, maybe. Right. It depends on the tenant, but like they're not going to clean it 4 or 5 times a week. You're taking care of issues as soon as they come up. Something breaks. Well, you have to fix it because the next tenant's coming in at 3 o'clock and you got to make sure it's good. So that's not really true. The more wear and tear, if you're taking care of your property and managing an effective short-term rental, it's going to have less wear and tear. And then the other part of it is that you could potentially negotiate a better deal for the landlord, right? So the landlord might be able to rent out the apartment for, let's say, $1,800 a month normally. But now you're going to come in there and you're going to be making, let's say, $1,000 spread when you rent it out on Airbnb. So what you could do if you need to sweeten up the deal is say, hey, how about I give you an extra $100 a month? So now instead of you getting $1,800, I'm going to give you $1,900. Plus, I'll take care of any issues that are under $100. I'm not going to call you up and say, hey, this thing broke. Can you come and fix it? I'm not going to be that kind of tenant because I'm managing the property professionally. So all of these things add up as a benefit to the landlord, and that's how you can get a deal for yourself.
Yeah, I love that strategy of incentivizing them, right? Like maybe a property's been sitting on the market for rent for, in your case, $1,800 for 6 months with no tenants. That's right. And then somebody comes like Alex, like, hey, I'm willing to give you $1,900 or $2,000 because I know that there's a spread that I can make on Airbnb for the Delta. And that could really be, again, a win-win. I mean, the goal is to find these owners. Not all owners are going to be open to this, right? I mean, full transparency, you'll have to talk and build your credibility of your business plan and everything like that. They're not just going to let Joe Schmo come in and rent out sublet their property. But if you come up with a good game plan and you incentivize them maybe monetarily, I love that strategy. But I wanted to circle back to Anna because she mentioned when we were speaking off camera that you had to kind of pivot, right? Because regulations changed a little in your market. You mind talking about that and, what you ended up doing?
I started with short-term rentals in 2020, and I started with one of them, and the same landlord that said yes to me on the first one loved the way it was going. So he said, hey, I got another apartment opening up. You want a second one? So I took the second one. And then he happened to own another commercial building in another town. And so he said, hey, you want another one? So I kept scaling it up to 4. And then at that point, I was running into issues with the regulations. And so I said, he wanted to continue to give me more, but I put the brakes on because I was like, I don't know how this is going to evolve now with these laws coming up. So what was happening is um, New York State was implementing laws saying that if you're going to operate an Airbnb, it has to be your primary residence. You have to live there X amount of days out of the month if you're going to rent it out on Airbnb. And that wasn't my case. This was not my primary residence. This was an apartment I was renting out, subleasing. So I was like trying to operate it like that as long as I could until the town started really cracking down on this rental arbitrage thing and people who weren't doing it the right way. So eventually the town came down hard on me saying, hey, you need to stop doing this. Otherwise, we're going to fine you $1,000 a day. And I got threatened with lawsuits and things like this. So it just wasn't worth it to me at that point to continue to operate it. So I had to shut down 2 of them. The other 2 I was able to keep, but I had to stop doing the short-term rental to make it legal. So I started doing 30-day rentals month to month. And that's what I've been doing for like the last year or so. And the month to month, it works well because it's less management intensive. So I have a lot less to worry about, a lot less turnovers. It's easier to manage, but it's definitely less profitable. I made a lot of money from 2020 doing the short-term rentals, easily surpassing 6 figures in cash flow over the last 4 years. But I wasn't able to sustain it because of the laws. And so I think it's important for people to look into that if they're deciding to do this strategy or not. It's, where are the laws now and where are they going? Is this like a friendly place to do business or not? Because you're going to put a lot of time, money, and effort into getting this business going and getting permission from a landlord. So you want to know kind of what you're getting yourself into in that regard, because I wasn't really thinking about that when I got started. I was just like, oh yeah, this is great. Just keep going. But then what about the exit? Not a lot of people think about the exit. Like when I had to get rid of those apartments, I had to sell all the furnishing. I had to, change out the locks. I had to do all this stuff. Where was I going to put the furnishing? I was trying to sell it privately. Some of it I couldn't. I had to put it in my own garage. And then it's like, you don't think about that when you're in the acquisition mode. You're just like, I want more. I want to grow this thing. But like, where is it going? Like, where are you going to end up? That's what you have to think about too.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard a lot of markets kind of switching regulations similar to you, Alex. So that's pretty cool that you're able to pivot to the midterm rental route, and definitely look at your local laws to see what is allowed. Alex mentioned his market says 30-day stays or more are allowed. So he was able to switch it over, use the furnishings. But I want to talk specifically about like somebody that wanted to do this and designing an MTR or a short-term rental or a furnished rental in general. Did you have any experience in that? And how did you, or were you just looking at Airbnb and kind of just copy and pasting for your own?
So you're talking about like interior design?
Yeah, the design. Did you have any experience in the interior designing portion of that?
Yeah, no, I had no experience with that. I had to learn as I went, and I had some input from my wife and my sister-in-law. She had some experience in design, so I actually had her help me out on one of my Airbnbs with the interior design portion, because that is a big hurdle. You don't really think about it, but it's like, okay, what color are we getting this? Where are we going to put it? How are we going to stage it? These questions are not so easy, especially if you're doing it in a home. The bigger, the more complex. And you have to think through some of these things, and it takes a lot of time. So if you're not the best at it, you may want to consider hiring an interior designer or having somebody just assist you in these decisions. I did tend to get better at it each property I bought because now I had a model, right? So I knew the first one was doing well. People liked it. The pictures were good. What worked, what didn't work. So I based it on that model and I tweaked a few things. But yeah, with the interior design, you also want to like focus on what are people going there for? Like, what's the main draw to that area? And like, what's the environment like? Is it more rustic? Is it more modern? Is it more luxurious? Is it more simple? You know, these questions you have to ask yourself so that you can present your property in a way that is going to cater to the guests that want to go there. And you can get ideas from other listings too. If you look on Airbnb, you can see what are these people doing and is it working?
Where I'm just curious to these two strategies, are there any like common mistakes that you know of that, you know, somebody that's looking to get into this, whether it's the lease option or the rental arbitrage, that you would, you know, just off the top of your head, think of like, hey, you should avoid doing these few things?
With the Airbnb stuff, I'd say the big one, like I mentioned before, the laws can trip you up. The other part of it is probably like your systems. When you're doing short-term rentals, I leveraged a lot of technology and a lot of tools to help me to manage it. Because if you're doing this by yourself with no resources or tools, you're gonna get overwhelmed very quickly. Like there's a lot, especially if your property's busy. You got a lot of, sometimes you got people checking out at 11. You have a problem you have to fix now, plumbing issue, whatever it is. And the next guest is checking in at 3:00. You got 4 hours to deal with an issue. It's not that easy. So now you have to manage dealing with the issue and then manage the guest and interacting with the guest. Hey, listen, we might need a push in check-in time because X, Y, and Z. And now they're not happy about it. How do you deal with that? There's little things that there's systems, there's things that work, right? There's apps that I would use, like Turno was a big one, used to be Turnover B&B. That would help me with cleaning. So as soon as somebody scheduled a booking, it would go to my cleaners. They'd get a notification, they'd accept it or reject it. I didn't have to go texting them, hey, can you do this cleaning? That happened automatically. There's another one, Beyond Pricing. That's for pricing your Airbnb, because that's not so simple as like, hey, long-term rental, what does it cost per month? No, this is going to change on a daily basis. It's going to change whether there's a holiday, you know, and a lot of different factors. So software like that helps you price it appropriately so that you can maximize your revenue on a daily basis. And then I use smart locks, Schlage Encode Smart Lock, so I can control the codes remotely. I can change them. That added security and it added ease. I could also have somebody who needed to go into the property to fix something. I didn't have to be there to give them a key. I could just go on my app and I could let them in. I can give them a unique code and then delete the code when they were done with the work. So there's like little tools like that that are going to help your business, because this Airbnb rental arbitrage, it is a business. It's not traditional real estate. Like I think of it differently. When I got into it, I thought I was just like investing in real estate. It's not really investing in real estate because you're not owning the property. You've created a hospitality business is what you did. So it's a whole different thing than just buying a property and renting it out.
Yeah. For the, I'm going to circle back to the lease options because that sounds really interesting to me. For the lease itself, do you use standard forms? Did you get an attorney to draft it? Like, is it different? I know as an agent, we get standard forms, but I don't know of any that include lease option language.
Yeah, no, I don't think you really see it as an agent. It's not a standard thing. It's, I started with looking at generic lease option agreements online, like LegalZoom and stuff like that. I was trying to look into what they look like. And then I would like tweak it to my situation and my state. And then I would bring that base form to an attorney. So instead of having an attorney draft it from scratch, because they're going to charge you a lot of money, I would say get a base form, something free or that's a couple dollars on the internet, specific to your state and your situation, customize it, tweak it, look it over, review it, and then bring it to an attorney and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Look this over, give me some feedback. And they're going to charge you a lot less to do a review than to structure it from the beginning, because the lease option agreement is different than a regular rental agreement. And you have to make sure you have certain language in there that protects you, because you don't want to put things in there like equity with the tenant, because the equity is an ownership stake. So you don't want to make it seem like, hey, the tenant has an equity position in your property and now you're going to run into trouble. So there's things with that you have to be very careful with, and it's well worth your money when you have an attorney review it.
Yeah. CYA, right? Call your attorney.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one
But-
more question about lease options. Can I ask it?
Of course.
So you said you adjusted the rental rates up or down depending on the deposit. I'm just curious for like math for dummies. Like, how did you calculate that? Like, I know you brought it down because you're getting a deposit, but like, what if they end up staying for like 10 years and never buying it? Like, how do you calculate that risk? Or does that make sense?
Yeah, so it doesn't mean you can't change the rent in the future.
Okay.
So it's just like a regular rental, right? You could do a 2-year lease with them if you want. And at the end of the lease, you can say, hey, do you still want to rent? Do you want to buy? Or what's your future plans look like? And then if they want to re-rent it, you can increase the rental amount to whatever the market's doing, whatever inflation's doing, if you want to do that. And as long as the tenant's okay with it, I mean, you have the option to increase the rent amounts. You're not locked in to that amount. And sometimes tenants, like I have another one that said, hey, after a couple of years, we're not really interested in buying the property. We actually just want to keep renting. Just want to rent. And they're cool with that, and I'm cool with that. I'm like, that's fine. You want to just keep renting, that's fine. And then down the road, they'll probably just move out into another rental or whatever they want to do. But it doesn't have to be one way or the other. There's a lot of options you have with this. There's no right way or wrong way with the down payment and the rent amount. You can make it what you want it to be, really.
Okay. I was just curious, like what calculations you put into it, because you were saying like if they put 10,000, you might lower their rent by 100 or 200. If they put less, you raise it. So I was just trying to get into your brain to figure how do you make that calculus. And then, like, do you have standard rates, like the length? Like, are your leases usually annually or 2 years? Or, like, do you have a standard amount? Like, this is how my leases are going to be before we renew, or you decide?
I've been just doing regular year rental agreements and then renewing at the end of the year with a slight rental increase. That's the way I've been doing it. And as far as, like, determining down payment and rent goes, I say just the general rule of thumb for me is I pick a low down payment, a middle down payment, and a high down payment. And then the middle down payment, I put at whatever the rental market value is. So if for that property, let's say I rent it out for $3,500, that normally, I'm going to say $3,500 for the rent. The middle down payment, let's say, is $5,000. Then I'm going to have a low one, $3,000 down. And that's going to be a higher rent
Above
amount.
market.
Like maybe another $100 above or 200. And then I have the high down payment option, and that's going to be below market.
Okay.
So that's just the way I do it, but you can structure it any way you want.
You give them options with your lease options, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I know we are running close on time, but I wanted to ask you because, Anna and I became agents before we became investors. What made you decide you wanted to get licensed? Were you licensed before you invested in real estate or vice versa?
So I was an investor first, and then I became an agent in 21. 21 I did. So I got my license in New York, and then through reciprocity, I got my license in Connecticut. So I'm licensed in both Connecticut and New York, and I got the license because I was running into frustrations with agents I was working with. I also wanted more control and access to the MLS. And I realized that I could do a lot more if I had my license than if I didn't. A lot of the agents I was working with were not working quickly. And as you know, as an investor, when you find a property you want, you have to move on it quickly. and I wasn't getting a quick response. So I was like, well, if I'm the agent, I'm in control of the negotiations. I'm in control of when I submit an offer. I'm in control of the data. I can see all of the MLS data. It's just, it gives you more resources and control. And that's why I think I decided to go with it.
Other than like the speed, were there anything like what, in your opinion, what makes like a good, specifically for investor friendly agents, right? You know, our show is called the Agent to Investor podcast, right? We want people who, a lot of them are investors themselves, but they're not agents. So what are some attributes in your opinion that makes a good like investor friendly agent?
I think, well, first and foremost, their experience with investment properties. Obviously, if you're looking for an investor-friendly agent, you want to know that they have experience with investment properties, because you, as the investor, you may need to lean on them for things that you don't know, especially if you're a beginner investor and this is your first property you're buying. You need to lean into somebody that can help you, that has knowledge, that has resources that you don't have. So you want to make sure they have that experience and those resources that you're looking for. So I would start with asking them questions about their background, like how do they start? What kind of experience they have with investment properties? Have you worked with other investors? What type of investment properties? Commercial, single family, multifamily? Because there's a lot of different ways you can invest in real estate, and they're not all the same. So you don't want to get paired. If you're looking for a single family home and you're a first time investor, you don't want to get paired up with somebody who just specializes in commercial property, because that's a whole different thing. So asking questions like that, and just resources, referrals, doing your homework, reviews online. How quick do they respond to you? Because if they're not getting back to you quickly, then they're not going to get back to the seller or the buyer quickly, and in whatever situation you're in. So just those little things will help you.
Yeah, great advice. Final few questions outside of, I mean, we talked a lot about real estate, right? But I'm just curious, outside of real estate, other than flying those cool jets that you fly, what are some non-real estate activities that you like to do, you and your wife?
A lot of outdoor activities. We enjoy hiking, working out, snowboarding, anything to do with like being outside, physical activity. I enjoy that. I enjoy reading a lot. I love reading all different types of books. So yeah, and music too, play the drums, do a little bit of
Oh,
everything.
nice. Well, now that you mentioned books, we got any specific book recommendations that you'd give us and our audience? They don't have to be real estate related, but anything that you're
Oh,
reading right
man.
now?
Yeah, no, books that I have so many top books of mine. I think like just in general, not real estate related, maybe. I'm really big on, I love mindset books, like motivational books and things like that. So what comes to mind is, like The Power of Positive Thinking by Vincent Peale. That's a great book. There's another one that I really enjoyed, Thoughts of a Philosophical Fighter Pilot. That was more of a mindset book. It was about a prisoner of war fighter pilot in Vietnam. And he was a prisoner of war for many years, but he ultimately escaped. And he kind of explains how he was able to use his mind and the readings that he was familiar with in regards to Stoicism and the philosophers like Epictetus and them, and how he used those philosophies to help him escape, essentially. But it's about mental fortitude and his story, so I like that a lot. Real estate related, I like, if you're trying to get into lease options, The Straight Path to Real Estate Wealth by Chris Crone. That's what got me started. That'll help you understand it a little bit better. And the other book that I really like, real estate related, is let me see here. I think it's this one. Yeah, I got this one right here. The next step to
Waking up the
waking up the
financial genius.
financial genius inside you. Yeah.
By who?
So
By
that
Mark
one is good.
somebody or other?
Yeah, Mark Harrelson.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a great book. I like that it has like a little note section at the end of each chapter so you can write your thoughts about the chapter, which is unique. So I like that a lot.
Awesome.
Adding that to my Google cart right now.
Yeah, I was just saying I haven't heard of any of those, which is great. I'm glad I asked that question. So, especially the mindset ones, here in real estate, it's a roller coaster, right? So you gotta continue
Oh
having
yeah.
the positive mindset. But Alex, this has been a ton of fun. Where can people reach out to you if they, want to connect with you, ask questions about those certain strategies that you talked about? Where are you on any social media or?
Yeah, so I do have a YouTube channel. They can follow me on there. I haven't been super active on it. I have to start posting a little bit more, but I do have a lot of great videos explaining certain things like lease options, house hacking, like number crunching, all that on there. If you want to look more into it, it's at Alex-Cortez on YouTube. And then if they have questions or inquiries, or if you're looking to buy or sell properties, if you're an investor and you want an investor-friendly agent, whatever the case is, you can reach out to me via email too at alexcortez@kw.com. All right.
Okay. And that's Cortez with a Z for everybody who's
Yes.
listening. Awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Definitely reach out to Alex with any questions. You can reach out to me at N Garcia Official on all social platforms, and you can reach out to Anna at.
I'm _realtor on Instagram and Annabylic everywhere else.
Awesome. And then tune into the next one. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
That was fun.